Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, March 28th. We are just about at the end of this month, and unfortunately my beloved Arizona Wildcats got kicked out of the Sweet 16, but what are you going to do? It was a rebuilding year anyway, so I'm just happy they got as far as they did. But Techstrong TV, we've got an amazing lineup today of some really great conversations. All kinds of conversations happening on today's episode. We get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Santiago Torres, who is Santiago Torres Arias. He is the assistant professor over at Purdue University. He's also the team lead of an open source project called In Toto, which is a framework to secure the software development lifecycle. The CNCF Technical Oversight Committee actually just voted to accept In Toto as a CNCF incubating project. So Alan and Santiago talk about the technology itself, what it means to be a CNCF incubating project, and hopefully how the technology is going to help secure our application development lifecycle. Interesting stuff. All right, after that, Alan speaks with Andrew Bruce, who is the CEO and founder of Data Gumbo, a company whose name makes me hungry just saying it. Data Gumbo actually has its first industry-grade smart contract marketplace, which is kind of an interesting concept. It is called Gumbo Store, and that enables companies to create, deploy, publish, and license intuitive smart contract templates to eliminate some of the transactional and informational friction that currently exists in commercial relationships. This is a kind of an evolution of the contract scene, and it is definitely a great conversation as well as a great technology, so you definitely want to check that one out. After that, we have an episode of the Open Mainframe Project, and one that I am very psyched about. This one is called Smash That Glass Ceiling. These women did. We are right on the heels of Women's History Month in March, and in this episode, John Murtick, who is the host, speaks with so many great women. Deb Giles, who is Giles, I think it is, who's the senior event manager over at the Open Mainframe Project and the Linux Foundation. Misty Decker, who is a member of the COBOL Working Group and Director of the Worldwide AMC Product Marketing at Micro Focus, and Stacy Miller, who is the co-chair of the Open Mainframe Project Marketing Committee and Product Marketing Manager over at SUSE. And they discuss some of their thoughts and experiences with diversity, inclusion, and advocacy as it pertains to their roles. It's really interesting to note that the majority of the leaders in the is it the Open Mainframe Project, I think? Yeah, in the Open Mainframe Project, the majority of leaders in that are females. So, yeah, there we go. And we also have an amazing show on, as you probably know, on Techstrong TV called Techstrong Women, which every episode talks about celebrating the differences and the successes that females have had in IT. But that's another show for another time. Okay, after the Open Mainframe series, we have we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 event. This one features Ali Khan, who is a partner of U.S. Consulting Services over at PwC. He's got a presentation called Entering Cloud 2.0, What Sits at the Heart of Cloud Transformation in 2022. So he talks about why it is now more critical than ever for business leaders to understand what factors sit at the heart of Cloud 2.0 to be able to reap the benefits of the technology this year. It's a very fascinating conversation, and Ali really brings out some points that maybe some organizations might not have been considering, so you definitely want to check this one out as well. After that, I am back with the news headlines, and then I have a great conversation with Andrei Mihalenko, who is the Vice President of Product and Engineering over at Apptio. And Andrei and I talk about agility, specifically as it pertains to digital business transformation. And we all know that being agile is what is one of the big drivers in successful business transformation. But there are certain things that folks aren't considering when it comes to agile and business transformation. So Andrei and I talk about that. It's a really, really fascinating conversation. It actually illuminated a couple points for me. So I highly recommend that you check out that conversation. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we close things out today with The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Dr. Mark Little, who is the Vice President of Engineering over at Red Hat. They're talking about the arrival of Jakarta EE, which Mark believes will accelerate the pace of Java innovation. Java's been around for a very long time, so sometimes the two words of Java and innovation don't necessarily go together, but hopefully Jakarta is going to be changing all that. All right, good stuff. This is a great lineup today. We're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, we are back. We've got, like I said before, an amazing lineup, and we're kicking things off with a conversation between Alan and Santiago Torres Arias, who is the assistant professor over at Purdue University, and he's also the team lead for InToto, which is a framework to secure the software development lifecycle. The CNCF Technical Oversight Committee just voted to accept InToto as a CNCF incubating project, so congratulations. And that is just a hallmark of a great technology. Hopefully it'll be much more widely embraced in the market. Santiago and Alan talk about the technology, what it means to be an incubating project, and so much more. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this interview is Santiago Torres Arias. And Santiago is a maintainer. He was also, for a long time, the lead developer of a project we want to talk to you about today called InToto. Hey Santiago, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hello, happy to be here.
So Santiago, we're going to talk InToto, and it's, well, I'm going to let you talk about its recent news around CNCF. But before we do that, let's give people a little background on yourself, kind of who you are, and let's talk about the origins of InToto project and what it's about.
Sure. So about myself, I'm originally from Mexico, but I'm now living in West Lafayette, Indiana. I am an assistant professor at Purdue University, and I do research on cybersecurity. In particular, this sort of up-and-coming or like very dangerous threat space, which is software supply chain security. Mm-hmm. This connects very well with, where did InToto come from? InToto was my PhD thesis. Back when I was doing my PhD at NYU, we started noticing this alarming rise of software supply chain compromises, and we were wondering, what can we do about all of this? Ironically enough, this all started by us looking at, how are people getting hacked in the software supply chain space? And is there a way for us to devise a system that can put a stop on many of these types of attacks? Back then, we were very connected to another graduated now CNCF project called TUF. We're almost like a splinter of it. But yeah, that was pretty much it. We started looking at space. We tried to see if we could come up with an open source project that could allow for developers and pretty much anybody in the ecosystem to mitigate the software supply chain attacks.
And, obviously in the last, maybe year, 18 months, software supply chain attacks have kind of risen to the top of the heap.
Right.
And, we're seeing software bill of materials and other kinds of potential mitigating solutions come to the top. So how long have you been at in Toto?
Well, I think I made the first commit, which was not very useful. Maybe 2015, 2013, something like that.
So this is way before you were doing software supply chain stuff before it was cool.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a hipster in supply chain security.
I hear you. All right. We're going to talk more about that in a second, but let's go over the recent CNCF announcement here. So Toto is now a CNCF project?
Yes. So we were admitted into the sandbox in 2019, but now we're officially incubating. So I am very excited about it. This is something that I've been wanting to see for a while, mostly not because of the title itself, but rather the doors it opens. And I think we're starting to see some of the visibility that it provides to be an incubating project. We're starting to see some fresh talent coming to the project and try to contribute a little bit more, which I think this is what it's all about, right? That's the open source vision.
Yep. And look, our audience is, generally speaking, huge supporters of Linux Foundation and the CNCF and many of the other foundations under the Linux Foundation umbrella. For those who aren't familiar, it's sort of the life cycle of an open source project in CNCF. As you mentioned, Sandbox. Sandbox is kind of the initial intake phase for most projects now. And it's just that. It's a sandbox. These are relatively immature projects in terms of the base of contributors, the base of users, the base of oversight, right? How many people are involved? And it's kind of that first rung on the ladder, if you will, of CNCF. Over time, projects hope to move up the ladder, as the life cycle advances. And the next stop, as you mentioned, in Toto is now reached, is incubation, which means that it's reached, I don't want to say a critical mass, because that's kind of graduation, but it's reached a wide enough mass of support in terms of both contributors as well as users and downloads and community members, that it's achieved not a higher notoriety, but a broader base of support. It's a bigger project now, and then of course a level after incubation is graduation, where the project has achieved sort of that critical mass that it's a self-sustaining organism almost at that point, right? And look, making it from sandbox to incubation is a major step, and congratulations to you. But it's also, yeah, you're welcome. I'm a parent, right? I've watched my kids grow up now, go to college, graduate college, and there's a little bit of that here, I'm sure, too, as someone who, look, this was your PhD thesis, right? And here you are now. You went from being the only developer to the lead developer to now you're a maintainer, right? And that's the way of the world, right? You gotta set it free for it to grow. But how does it make you feel? I mean, there's pride, of course, but let's talk about your feelings around it.
Definitely. And I certainly connect with this sort of a parenthood feeling, mostly because, as you were saying, I believe philosophically that as a parent, you need to just let go a little and let things float without your intervention. And for me, that's been a goal since the beginning. Part of my personal success milestones as an open source project was to start seeing people come in with their own initiative and their own vision of how they think it fits the broader agenda of supply chain security. I consider myself a smart person, but I don't think I have all of the answers. So seeing new people float in and say, hey, we want this feature, or you know what, it would integrate fantastically with this other CNCF project if you tweak the specification this way. To me, this is what it's all about. I started writing the project pretty much in a very opinionated way, almost like an academic, sort of like just looking at it from a. And now it's more of a. I feel my role is just to see that everybody's voice is heard, and making sure that anybody that wants to have input, they have a chance at it. And that's very fulfilling in a sense. Sometimes I have this like reaction of like, oh my God, I just want to implement a feature myself. But I need to remind myself constantly, hey, there's enough to go around for everybody. And let's just make this grow. Speaking of incubation, I think that's also what it's all about, right? There's a recognition by the community that this is worthwhile to grow. That's kind of what the incubation term pretty much alludes to. So yeah, I'm also trying to just enable this sort of a import of interest and attention to pretty much make it where it needs to go.
Love it. Santiago, let's talk to our audience out here, right? How do they get involved, either as a potential contributor, which, look, is probably realistically less than 10%. I think it's less than 6% of members of a given open source community or project are contributors, right? But how do they get involved, even, just as a user or a community member? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, I would say there's like three big things that I recommend. There's the obvious one, which is, well, take a look at a code base. We actually have different like sub projects within Toto. We have implementations in different languages that go from Rust to Go to Python. They're all in different levels of maturity, and we generally label issues as up for grabs for like new contributors to just identify things that are like bite-sized, not part of the critical path, that maybe a little bit more obvious, but to allow them to say, hey, I'm here, I'm interested, and I try this like little issue first to kind of, show my interest. On the second thing is, I think, it's going to sound very cliche, sorry about it, but supply chain security is really like as strong as the weakest link, right? In Toto needs more adoption downstream, and part of what we need is for users to try it out in their ecosystem and just tell us, well, where are the pain points? What's missing? To give you some context, for example, there's integrations with like a Jenkins plugin, so you can add Toto to your CI. There's an integration with Techstrong, using Chains, which is a Tecton project. So you can also add Toto to your like Tecton pipelines. Now, I believe that trying these things out, there's always going to be problems, right? Like either from the simpler of like, hey, the documentation is not entirely clear, and like I didn't understand it, and here's an issue telling me how I got confused, to like, hey, I tried this thing, and here's like an issue or like a pull request asking for something to be changed, right? So that would be a second one. The third one, I think, is maybe a little bit less concrete. But again, thinking of supply chain, we're trying to cover everything. This is the evocative term of Toto. We need to go from A to Z. What I think is very useful is just for people that want to be involved is, for example, to participate in the tax security supply chain compromises repo. This is, by the way, a project that we started in Toto, again, trying to look at the more like data-based understanding of how supply chain compromises happen. We started cataloging all of supply chain compromises dating back to 2003. So a very, very useful way to contribute. And I think to Toto, but also to the broader like supply chain security goal within the CNCF is to, if you see a supply chain compromise in the news, browse to the GitHub repo of the supply chain compromises of the CNCF tax security and see if it is there. If it is not there, then just make a pull request. It's just like a little, I don't know if by now it's just a YAML file. You have like a URL, a little description, and we iterate over it. This is very useful, again, because we can get inspiration. So like, oh wow, like this hack happened in this way. How can Intodo have helped? Or maybe it couldn't have helped. Maybe we need to tweak it to help with this. So that's a third. That's a little bit more out there, but at the same time, I don't want to downplay how useful it really is.
Sure is. I mean, because that's in many ways the lifeblood, right? You real world examples and experience in there. Hey, you know what Santiago, we never even mentioned the URL for people who want to go do any of these things.
Right. So if you want to, like the URL, like the webpage is in-toto.io.
And Toto is TOTO, right?
TOTO, yes. That would be the website. The GitHub repo would be github.com / I forget. I always confuse the forward and backward slash. In Toto. Same. In-Toto. That's Latin for as a whole. So we're, again, trying to be all-encompassing.
Got it. Hey, just a silly question. How'd you come up with the name?
Well, the name, actually, I did not come up with a name. It was a colleague of mine at NYU. His name is Vladimir Diaz. I think he came up with a name. And originally, you're going to laugh about it. Originally, it was called Toto, like the band.
Right, like the music, yeah.
Yeah, then we realized that there's a lot of Totos out there. And I had a lot of fun early on because there was always this sort of like moment in which you were introducing in Toto that you would say like, oh, Toto, and they would say like, oh, like this reference that I never thought of, right? I started like there's Toto, a like brand of like bathroom equipment. Mm-hmm. There's Toto, the mascot of like the Wizard of Oz, like the little dog.
Yeah,
totally forgot about it.
And your dog Toto too. Yep.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of Totos. So we then went back to the dictionary and we're like, actually, the phrases in Toto that actually means as a whole. It used to pretty much just mean whole, but yeah, we realized there was a huge name clash going on there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Cool, man. Hey, Santiago, I want to, first of all, congratulate you on something that, how many people's PhD thesis, well, first of all, how many people have a PhD thesis, but how many people's PhD thesis goes on to become a CNCF incubated project. So congratulations to you. We'll be watching. We like to get involved with CNCF and Linux Foundation projects. So keep us appraised of the progress at Intodo, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, I think I'm very excited about what's coming in the future.
Alrighty, Santiago Torres Arias, a former lead developer, now maintainer of the CNCF incubated project Intodo. That's in-toto.com. You can check it out. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan speaks with Andrew Bruce, who is the CEO and founder of Data Gumbo. Data Gumbo has launched the first industry-grade smart contract marketplace, which it calls Gumbo Store, which is a pretty nifty technology. It enables companies to easily create, deploy, publish, or license intuitive smart contract templates. So the goal is to eliminate some of the friction that exists in organizations with commercial relationships from a transactional and informational perspective. It's a great technology and it's a great conversation. So let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment here. My guest for this segment is Mr. Andrew Bruce. He's going to introduce us to a company new to our audience, or to most of you, I think. The name of the company is Data Gumbo. Andrew, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All righty. So Andrew, as I mentioned, the company's name is Data Gumbo. It's a company I think that's new to most of our audience. But if you wouldn't mind, let's hear a little bit about your background and a little bit about Data Gumbo.
Well, first of all, I have to answer the obvious question, since we're talking about gumbo, is where did the stupid name come from? Don't know if you ever tried starting a company recently, but you have to get the domain name and the company registration and make sure that there's nothing, no certified trademarks or anything like that. And it's a real pain. And so
yes, it is.
So,
I've been there, done that.
So we were kicking ideas around. We didn't want to be locked into any one industry vertical or anything else. So we wanted to do something with data, and we were just sitting in a pub one day drinking beer, and somebody said Data Gumbo, and we all burst out laughing what a stupid name it was, and then we couldn't get it out of our heads. And so that's where the name comes from. You get a bunch of data, you put in the pot, stir it up, make it taste good, you get Data Gumbo. So that's where the name comes from.
Well, sounds good. I mean, I thought maybe you guys were down in New Orleans at Mardi Gras. Someone had too much to drink, and hence the name. But similar.
Yeah,
there was drink involved.
We're just down the road. We're in Houston.
Yeah. Oh, you're in Houston. I love it down in Houston. There's actually some good restaurants down in Houston, but that's another story. I know the Houston tech scene has been really growing as well. I have a lot of friends down there. I used to go down for my friends at Alert Logic were based there many years, and Misha, and then my friend Sam Van Ryder and Michael run HughesSecCon, which is a big security con down in Houston. So good to hear. I always like to hear about companies coming out of Houston. So we figured out the name. Let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you come to do this company?
I'm from the Isle of Man, so once again, you probably haven't heard many people from the Isle of Man. Famous for the Bee Gees and motorcycle racing.
Yep.
Naturally, not many people know the Bee Gees were born there, but they were. Came to America to study computer science. Through a long series of accidents, got involved in building an autonomous drilling rig for National Oil Barco, or NOV, was the world's largest drilling equipment manufacturer. And we were implementing these algorithms from the space program, Draper Labs up in Boston. And we needed data from lots of different places, from companies who didn't like each other very much, companies like Schlumberger, Halliburton, different divisions of our own company, the drilling contractors, the oil companies. And so it was a real problem trying to get access to this data. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was running global operations for the competition. There was a downturn in the oil market, laid everybody off, including myself, and said, what am I going to do next? And thought, well, let's solve that data problem. So we started out solving the data problem, how to get access to data. And that's how Data Gumbo started. And then we got into the smart contract business. So what we do is we provide a smart contract network for industrial use, so we can automate contracts between major industrial companies to solve a specific problem of mistrust between buyers and sellers of industrial services. So it's a little very, very quick background on me.
Interesting. Let's talk about these smart contracts. So it sounds like, I'm trying to think of the name. There was this company that would, escrow.com, right? That would hold stuff in escrow until stuff was delivered, would hold usually money in escrow until services were delivered. But that doesn't sound like what smart contracts are about. Here in smart contracts, it sounds like it might be data that's being sort of quarantined or held in some sort of escrow. What let's dive into that. What is a smart contract?
Let me give you a very simple example, because it's what we're doing is the marriage of smart contracts and IoT data. So with all the security and everything else involved in that. So if you go to a gas station and you swipe your credit card and you pump your gas, you're essentially entering into a smart contract, because you're agreeing to the price of the gas, the quantity of the gas, the quality of the gas, the payment terms, and you're making a payment. And that's all basically what a smart contract is. We're taking that efficiency that we've got in the consumer space and we're applying it to the industrial space, because there's IoT sensors all over the place. We've got contractual terms between buyers and sellers. But in the industrial space, there's this massive inefficiency. There's no 30, 40 step processes on each side of the invoice, generating the invoice, confirming the invoice, confirming that the services or products claimed to have been delivered. And there's this process here that happens, which is incredibly litigious and fraught with delay. So we're changing the industrial transactions to be as simple as buying gas, which is essentially a smart contract.
Okay, makes a lot of sense then. So you guys recently launched, is it a version of, or a new version of the product?
No, so we launched something called Gumbo Store, and the concept of that is just like, you've got the Google product, Google Play, and you've got the App Store, and
it's a marketplace.
It's a marketplace. It's a marketplace for smart contracts, because we can write smart contracts all day long, but our customers want to write them, industry associations want to write them, consulting companies want to write them. So why would we lock up that space? So we've opened it up and said, okay, here's the API, here's everything you need to write a smart contract. Knock yourselves out. And so we're creating this marketplace for people to be able to write smart contracts, distribute smart contracts, make money out of writing smart contracts, standardize the industry in the case of industry associations. So it's a marketplace to take advantage of the network that already exists because everything's confirmed through a blockchain. So all of the confirmation of the transactions and why everybody can trust this is because each side of the smart contracts is all the data is stored in a blockchain, which is, as you know, immutable or unchangeable, and so you can trust the transaction on both sides.
Excellent. And that's an important piece of it, obviously. So, Andrew, so now if I wanted to become sort of a smart contract provider, right, I could use your marketplace and in essence put up templates that can then be kind of customized per transaction.
That's correct. Yeah.
And,
so
go ahead.
Yeah, for example, you could say, let's say I want to create a smart contract for filing. Let's say there was a flaring incident, and you said, okay, I think there's an opportunity there to automate the paying of fines and the declaration to the government of all these flaring incidents. And that's something that's generally applicable for the whole industry. You could say, I want to write that smart contract, I want to monetize that, and I want to use that to drive additional services for my company. You could do that.
Get it. And then, but what about now? Okay, so the next guy wants to come around and rather than reinventing the wheel, he just wants to build upon that. Right, maybe I got to do some customizations for my particular circumstance,
Yep.
but I don't want to have to start from scratch. So we could sort of template that. But the point I want to make is that the underlying blockchain, the underlying infrastructure, if you will, of this smart contract, that's really what Data Gumbo is providing, sort of as the back end, if you will, of the marketplace, is that by having that smart contract in the marketplace, you don't have to worry about that infrastructure. You guys do that infrastructure.
Yeah, if you think of it like a railroad, we provided the rails, we provided the train stations and the gauge of the rails and everything else. Anybody who wants to write put a carriage on that railroad can. And the other, you started opening up an interesting can of worms, which is I think going to be a huge growth area, which is open source smart contracts, because we're open sourcing a lot of our smart contracts, saying, okay, we put all this money into these, we've tested them, we've approved them. Here they are as open source. So use this as a starting point, and then you can innovate on top of it. And obviously that's, I think universities and people like that are going to start saying, okay, we want to be able to teach classes, and you don't want to necessarily, the way I think about it is, if you want to be able to use a database, you don't actually go and start building, designing how do you build a relational database, and you just use one that's already there, right? So we're trying to provide the infrastructure that people can innovate on top of.
Makes sense, because at some point, right, I'm talking as an entrepreneur now, business person. Look, if you're the one who's providing that infrastructure behind the scenes that make it all happen, it behooves you to have as many of these, let's call them templates out there, right? Smart contract templates out there for people to be able to use, at their whim and customize rather easily, because, by their very nature, these things need to be customized to the transaction. But it's really them using the infrastructure where you guys, I imagine, are making the money on it.
That's correct. Yeah. So, it's good for the customers. Everybody who's already a customer of the network, they get access to more functionality on the network. It's good for the publishers of the smart contracts, because they get access to all the customers who are already on the network. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. And yes, you're right. We make money on the infrastructure.
Sure. Let's talk about that infrastructure a little, Andrew. So, part and parcel is, number one, it has to work, right? It has to be easy to use. But number two, as you alluded to with blockchain and security, this thing has to be ironclad bulletproof, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about some of what you've built, because I got to imagine that's where a lot of your development and efforts have gone into, building out a scalable infrastructure like that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I should probably mention that our infrastructure has been, we've got white papers from MIT. They've come in and they've looked at the whole thing, because you can imagine trying to sign these multinational deals with these huge companies. They want to know that the infrastructure is robust. So we've been through all of the IT due diligence that you can imagine. I would say something rude. It's not appropriate. So we've been examined thoroughly, put it that way, is what I was going to say.
I know what you were going to say.
Right.
Go ahead.
So yeah, you have to build in security from the very moment we touch the data. So the very moment we touch the data, it's encrypted. So we get the data off an IoT sensor or a control system or something else. You encrypt the data. This is a private permissioned blockchain. We wrote it from scratch ourselves. So we're not building on a different blockchain that is not fit for purpose for industrial transactions. And we can get into a whole discussion about that, because it's probably a really important point. Is a lot of the blockchains that are out there are not fit for purpose for industrial transactions, because you need all the data stored on the chain, and the data block size needs to be big in order for you to have a legally enforceable smart contract. So the data is picked up from the sensors. It's used by the smart contract to calculate results. The results are stored in a block, which is obviously hashed, and then the chain is also hashed. And then you've got blockchains, which are held by all the different participants in the transaction. So then you've got the security of the customers. So you've got security of the customer, you've got security of the blockchain, you've got the security of the block, you've got the encryption of the data in the block. So if somebody were to try and hack it, they would have to hack all of those systems in parallel at the same time, and that would give you one block, which would give you one piece of data, which really isn't very helpful for anything. So I'm not saying it's bulletproof, because nothing's bulletproof. It's as close as bulletproof as you can get.
Absolutely, and I think that's an important distinction, a point to make as well, Andrew. Is too many people put marketing terms out there, and the fact of the matter is nothing is truly. Unless it's not attached to anything and it exists in its own Idaho. You know what we didn't mention? We didn't even mention websites for any of these things, Andrew. Where do people go to find out about them?
Well, thank you for that. That's www.datagumbo.com.
So that's the whole data gumbo thing, and the smart contract marketplace. Is there a separate URL for that?
That's going to be in the same place. It's right now.
It's the main page.
Yeah, right. That's correct.
Excellent. Hey, man, Andrew, I want to thank you for coming on and telling us about it. You know, we often hear about blockchain, and we hear automation, and sometimes it's hard to imagine where the rubber meets the road, right? Where this lends itself to practical applications that are helping business and people every day, and this is a great example of it. Best of luck with Data Gumbo, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for making time.
All righty. Andrew Bruce, CEO, Data Gumbo. Smart contract marketplace. Go check them out at datagumbo.com. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, my favorite segment of today's show. It is the Open Mainframe Project, or the Open Mainframe series. Today's episode is titled Smash That Glass Ceiling. These women did. It's really interesting to note that more than 35% of women at the Open Mainframe Project actually have leadership positions. So the diversity is alive and well at the Open Mainframe Project, which is with the Linux Foundation. So this particular episode features host John Murtick, and he talks with Deb Giles, who is the Senior Event Manager over at Open Mainframe Project and the Linux Foundation, as well as Misty Decker, who is a member of the COBOL Working Group and Director of Worldwide AMC Product Marketing over at Micro Focus, and Stacy Miller, who is the co-founder or co-chair of the Open Mainframe Project Marketing Committee and project manager over at SUSE. They all discuss with John their thoughts and experiences with diversity, inclusion, and advocacy as it relates to their roles. And certainly a lot of the experiences that they've had have carried over into IT in general. So it is a great conversation. Highly encourage you to take a listen. We're going to roll it right now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Open Mainframe. The Open Mainframe is a monthly video project done in partnership with the Open Mainframe Project of the Linux Foundation and us here at Techstrong Group and Techstrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group, and the Open Mainframe, as I mentioned, is with the Open Mainframe Project of Linux Foundation, and my co-host is the director of the Open Mainframe Project at Linux Foundation, John Murtick. We're going to come to John in just a second, but we're actually going to introduce him last, or give him a chance last. Let me introduce you to a powerful panel we have for us today. I'm going to start off with Stacy Miller. Hey, Stacy, welcome to the Open Mainframe.
Great to be here. Thanks. My name is Stacy Miller, and I'm with SUSE. I'm one of the product marketing managers, and I'm responsible for the SUSE Manager project, SUSE. And I'm also on the board of the Open Mainframe Project as one of the marketing co-chairs.
Excellent. Stacy, thank you and welcome. Next up, let me introduce Misty Decker. Hey, Misty, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little about yourself.
Hi, Alan. Thank you. Yes, I've been a mainframer for 30 years, 31 now, I guess. And landed in this venture by accident, but somehow it turned out to be exactly the right place. I am on the governing board for the Open Mainframe Project, and my current position is at Micro Focus. I am director of the application modernization product marketing team.
Fantastic, and welcome, and thanks for being here, Misty. Last but certainly not least among our panel today is, and if I mispronounce, I apologize. I don't know if it's Deb Giles or Deb Giles. How do you pronounce it, Deb?
Deb Giles. You got
All right.
Second try was a win.
Okay, well,
You do enough of these. There's only so many ways you could go. But Deb Giles, welcome. A little bit about yourself.
Hi. I am a senior event manager at the Linux Foundation, been here for a while now, and I specifically help Open Mainframe Project with their summit, which we are very excited about this year. I've worked with them since the inaugural one, so looking forward to it.
Absolutely. As long as we have it, let's hear a little bit about the summit.
The summit's taking place this September in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are so excited. We're going back in person. Not back, first time in person, actually. So very excited and looking forward to it.
Well, we may have to have a Techstrong sighting there. We'll talk.
Sounds good.
I'm going to be there. It'll be a party. You should join us, Alan.
That's right. I'm going to be there as well.
Philly in September. We'll put it on our calendars. So I mentioned John Murdoch as my co-host, but John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, Alan. I'm the program director here at the Linux Foundation. I work across a lot of our different foundations. Specific for this video here, I work with the Open Mainframe Project. It's its director, and just really try to keep everything moving, help provide a lot of guidance to our communities to help make them successful, and work with our member companies to help them engage with the open source community and also find success with open source within their organizations. And we've been doing this for a little over a year now, Alan. I think we've really had some great interviews. We've had some great topics. I will be honest, this is one I'm really looking forward to. And it's going to be kind of, I know you'd mentioned in the preamble that I'm not shy to talk. This is one here where I really want to be a little bit more of the listener and less of the talker, because I think we have some interesting viewpoints that I really want to hear from this time. And I'm really excited about this panel.
Fantastic. I guess, we'll see how it goes, John. I can't believe you're not going to talk.
I mean, we'll find out. We can stricken that from the record if it doesn't work out. But
I don't want to. Contribute as you always do, John. It's a pleasure to have you on. So, folks, this is the Women's History Month, right? March is Women's History Month, and we thought, in honor of that, we'd have three of the leaders of the Open Mainframe Project on to celebrate Women's History Month, but more than celebrate. The Open Mainframe Project in many ways is a shining example of a project where women have been given the opportunity and have taken the opportunity and hold a lot of the leadership positions within. I think it's something like 35% or more of the leadership of Open Mainframe Project is women in those roles. And that's fantastic, right? Congratulations, and that's good. Is it enough? I don't know. I'll throw it out to you three ladies. Is 35% the right number? I hate to get into this whole quota thing anyway. I grew up, I'm a child of the 60s and 70s and all of that, but is 35% the right number?
That's a really tough question to answer, Alan. And if I may, I think 35% is a fantastic number given comparisons to the rest of the industry. And so rather than focusing on making the Open Mainframe Project have more women in leadership, I'd really would want to focus the Open Mainframe Project in reaching out to more women that can then move into leadership in their own companies, because that is the area where this project really can make an impact.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that, instead of focusing on a number, I think it's the right people in the right job at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think women need to be given the opportunities to get into those positions. And I think the Open Mainframe Project has done a fantastic job in providing those opportunities and providing opportunities for women as they grow into the field.
Sure. I mean, so let me kind of state the obvious. When we talk about the mainframe, look, this is, a lot of people say, oh, that's an old technology. It's been around forever. Well, it has. It's probably been around 50 years or so, at least the mainframe, maybe more. 60 years, maybe more, the mainframe, right? I mean, my mom was working on mainframes more as a data kind of person, but, geez, I guess it has to be in the 70s, right? Mid-70s. I was a teenager. So I think almost with that kind of, background, you would say, okay, well, maybe there wasn't a lot of women then, and so maybe it makes it a little harder for women to come into this particular area because it is so long. I mean, Misty, you mentioned you're in mainframes 30 years, but you even mentioned it, right? And it's a common theme I hear. I call it the accidental tourist scenario, right? You by accident got into it.
Yeah. Ellen, I have to give you a bit of history here because this is a topic I've researched quite a bit. I do a lot of speaking about women in tech at conferences, and the mainframe and COBOL were the majority operated by and run by and developed by women when it first came out, because it was considered to be a low-level technician, secretarial type job. As soon as those jobs started to gain prestige and the value of computers to businesses became known, that's when women started getting pushed out of those jobs and replaced by men. So this view that women aren't into STEM, or that we're just now getting women into STEM, we're really trying to rebalance what was way too many women when it was a low value job, and then became way too many men when it was a high value job. And now we're trying to get to a point where it's even across all genders.
And that's really interesting, because my very first technical job was a computer printer operator of a big mainframe. And it was an entry-level job out of college.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it feels like those were the jobs. Those were some of the jobs that women could have.
Yeah, I think back to my mom. I mean, look, my mom was a single mom raising 4 kids.
And it was a job that, I mean, we weren't rich by any means. It didn't pay a lot of money. And maybe it was maybe that is why she got into it, Misty. You're right. It was sort of that entry level, men didn't want to do it kind of thing. But nevertheless, she raised 4 kids doing it, right? And so
it's a fabulous career. It really is. And so one of the things I talk a lot about is unconscious bias. And these preconceptions that people have, we can't avoid it. What we think, a lot of our brain is built to make automatic assumptions based on the data that's been input. And the analogy I use is, if you know those chatbots turned evil very quickly when they're engaging with, prejudice and really horrible people on the internet. And it's because our brains kind of operate the same way, where we take in data and it automatically processes it and it forms opinions that you don't even realize you have. And I'm going to be doing a session here soon at Share about unconscious bias against technologies. We have the same thing with the mainframe. You said it at the beginning. People think of it as old. They think of it as outdated. And when they look at it with an objective point of view, they see how modern that technology really is. but that myth continues to pervade because it's out there. And the same goes with women in these tech jobs. That statement that women have never been a part of computing technology and we now need to get them in, or this is not what women are good at, or this is not what women are interested in, is not a reflection of actual reality. It's a reflection of the conversation that we've all internalized and absorbed. Am I making sense of what I'm trying to get across here?
I agree with you 199%, right? I was, quick story. I'm in South Florida.
So I'm invited by the Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale, Junior Achievement Team to go down to their facility. We're going to work with them and sponsor some stuff. And if you ever get a chance to come down here, you should go check this out. Wayne Huizenga and the Huizenga Family Trust gave them like $12 million to build out this palace of a place. And they have like a working town, if you will. And, these are high school kids all the way down to elementary, but we focused on 11th graders. What are the two biggest things that 11th grade boys and girls want to do? They want to be a social media influencer.
Which okay, I'll go with it. But number two, they want to get a job in tech. Girls as well as boys, right? And it did my heart good when I went there and I got a chance to really talk to some of these kids. It was as much girls as boys. There was no numerical, seesaw kind of thing. It was about 50-50. Somewhere along I don't know if that's the new normal, to your point, Misty, or if somewhere along the line between 11th grade and the workforce, something goes awry.
Yeah, the research shows that we're actually, in the United States, we're actually graduating more women with STEM degrees than men, but they end up being a minority in the workplace. And the research isn't 100% clear on it, but some of it is women choosing to have other lifestyles. Some of it is women meeting hostile work environments and giving up and moving into something else, right? I have a career of being technical. The vast majority of my career has been technical, and I just recently took a job in marketing, which is considered not technical to a lot of people, right? So product marketing really is kind of technical and not technical at the same time. So that's not really a fair unconscious bias against marketing. But you can see how these migrations, how the careers kind of migrate and move over time. So you can't say it's one thing, but it is interesting when I saw that stat that we are actually graduating more women with technical degrees than men.
It blows my mind. Deb, we haven't heard from you though, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pull you in here.
Well, I mean, I'm actually learning a lot from this already, so I'm just sitting back and learning. Kind of like Missy said, so I do not have a technical background, and so a lot of people do not view my job as technical, but I'm more on the marketing side with event management. But I definitely have learned a lot of tech over the years and have, a passion for it now. That is my career. But the thing that I see that I think the Open Mainframe does a great job, like Misty was referring to at the beginning, is growing people and giving them the opportunity. We do have a lot of female leadership within the community right now, but the things that we're doing, and I'm allowed to help with this through the events, is providing opportunities for those that want to grow in that, or those that want to take that on the future and do things like that. And I think that's something that they're really successful with at the Open Mainframe project. And I credit to all the leadership that is there, obviously. But yeah, I think they've been doing a wonderful job of that. And so it's interesting to hear that so many people are graduating, or women are graduating with STEM degrees, because I feel like that gives a lot of hope for if we continue to provide those opportunities, and if we continue to provide, she was saying a hostile work environment and things like that. The more we speak about it, the more we address it, the more that's going to reduce the opportunities for those to become the standard, and the opposite will become true, and allow everyone that's graduating with a STEM degree to have opportunities to then grow in that, work in that industry, build that leadership, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting, Misty, when you're talking, it just it seems so much that we just have a lot of the things that you're saying tie into a lot of a cultural thing that we've had for decades and decades, and roles and things like that. And there's sort of broader cultural things that are happening that are starting to look at that. But, when I hear the stat around STEM jobs, and then, just, women for whatever reasons just not moving into the workforce, what it always feels to me like is there's sort of a missing bit of sort of intentionality from the workforce of helping bringing them in. There's a term in open source of, open source is driven by meritocracy, which I personally hate the term, because it just becomes so loaded, and there's so much of those cultural norms and stuff that gets tied in. And I think about it more as a doocracy, meaning if you're willing to do the work, there's a spot for you. It's really interesting though, Deb. I think about a lot of the work that you do in the events team, and you work with us in Open Mainframe, but you also work across a number of our different communities and different verticals and different horizontals as well, along with our broad open source summit events. And one of the big things that our events team has intentionally focused on is diversity, and in some ways went to very great lengths to make some of that happen. I don't know, maybe Deb, if you want to, I'm not putting you in a position to brag on the events team at all, but I just sort of talk about like some of the things that you've had to went through, and what that has made some of the events you participated, come out to be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky to work on an events team that does put diversity and inclusion as one of their top priorities. And I think all of our projects benefit from that. And it helps not just help their events, but it helps their communities and the projects just in general, the folks that make up their community, because we're helping encourage that from an event level. But we do a lot of things that encourage diversity and inclusion in our events, trying to find as many opportunities to have women as speakers, whether invited, whether accepted through the CFP, providing opportunities about that, but not just to talk about tech. We have a lot of women that come in to talk about tech, but also that come in to just talk about women in the workforce, women in tech industries or, tech companies, and how they're growing or building leadership, and how others can, do the same for them. We also do a lot of opportunities with, I know the Open Source Days does Kid Days, where they try to bring, kids in and have a day where like, look, your parents have spent a week at a conference learning about technology. Let's do the same with you so that you learn it from a young age. You're excited about it. You can kind of see what your parents are doing, but at a kid level, so that you start to develop those skills. And I mean, I feel like that helps them grow from day one to kind of want to have a career in that, or to find it as something fun. We do a lot of diversity efforts around women in tech lunches, or diversity in tech lunches, where the conversation just is around diversity. What's working well, what's not working well, what other people are seeing. And it allows a safe space for people to have those conversations that they may not be able to have elsewhere. So just trying to find any initiative and opportunities we can to have that conversation and ensure that people feel included in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a lot of like, and Deb probably understates a lot of it, but I mean, just doing some of these things is just hard work.
It is. Let me make a confession. Hi, my name's Alan, and but, we were putting on, we're going to do some in-person road shows this year. We're so excited. First one was supposed to be in Atlanta in about 10 days. As the CEO here, I took my eye off the ball. I suggested a few people to speak and let it go at that, let the team run. I never looked at the page of the speakers because it was only 6 speaking slots and then a lot of workshops with training. And we got called out on it because it turned into a sausage factory. And not just all men, all white men. And we got called out rightfully on it, right? Because I've been a champion for diversity myself for years and years. And, I was horrified because it was on my watch and I was sleeping at the wheel. And, I couldn't call I couldn't call an emergency team meeting on Sunday, but first thing Monday morning we did yesterday, and I pulled the plug on the whole thing. Right, we punted it, and we're going to reschedule it in June. It's costing me $25,000. I haven't said this publicly, but it cost us $25,000 because I couldn't get my money back from the venue and the food and beverage and everything. But in today's day, you can't do that, right? And I had to really. I thought we understood it, and we didn't. It's hard. It's hard because we did a CFP. We didn't get women. So everyone just went with the easy, let's fill the slot. We're under a time strain.
Alan,
Yeah,
I want to
I
reassure
applaud
you. Alan, do not feel bad because unconscious bias is in all of us, right? I've seen women organize events and invite only white male speakers. It's not a you thing, it's an us thing. All of us have to actively, and the way I describe it is unconscious bias is like that invisible current in the river. And you're floating in the river and you're looking at the sky and you have no idea how far you've drifted. So the first step is to put points on the riverbank. Those are your measurements. Constantly check, where am I flowing in this river? And the second thing is in order to keep from drifting downstream, you have to actively row. And so you have to put that energy, and that's exactly what you're talking about right now, Alan. So you put that stake into the riverbank to see where you are, and you are actively rowing. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, heroic.
Thank you. I wish everyone agreed, but thank you. But, John, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Stacey
go ahead.
wants to talk.
Stacey,
Stacey, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Moreover.
No, I just wanted to say, and I also think it's up to women to step up also. I think, I know I was on the CFP panel for Open Mainframe Summit last year. And, we didn't get a lot of women speakers. And I think that one thing that can help is a strong mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk a little bit about something that SUSE is doing, but I think any company is doing. We're actually working in a micro mentoring program in our Women in Technology program that we focus on girls, high school and early college, to help them kind of navigate through the technical landscape to see what in the technical landscape might align with their interests. And it's like a 2-month program. We have every other week mentoring programs, one-on-one mentoring with somebody from the company and the young woman. And we also bring them into team meetings. We bring them into, if we go to events, we'll bring them to an event. And we really try to immerse them into, this is real life. This is real life technology. And it's worked out really well.
That's
so
great.
I think it's, it's not only, we get lost in our own unconscious bias, but we also need to bring the women along with us. So we do have those women speaking up and saying, I want to speak.
You know what?
I want to participate.
I love this program, Stacey. And another area that people talk about a lot is imposter syndrome. And I describe imposter syndrome as when your unconscious bias is against yourself. So you've internalized those external statements that women aren't technical, women can't be a speaker. And that gives you that internal, I don't think I can do this, because you've internalized that own thing. And your program that you're describing, Stacey, directly is rowing against that current by giving those women the opportunity to see themselves as technical and able to do it. But more than that, there's another current going on in this world, and that is women know that they're discriminated against. And so there's a level of fear of putting yourself out forward because you're afraid you're going to hit that bias. And so by making those one-on-one personal connections, you've made it safe for those women to know that they're not going to hit bias in your space, in SUSE. because you've reached out to them and they feel like they have a friend, they have a connection. It's a place of safety for them.
Good
So
stuff.
it's great for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one thing I wanted to jump on with that, Stacey, you mentioned around you were on the CFP committee for Open Mainframe Summit, and the whole community really appreciates the service you put into that. And you were right. The number of submissions were low, but I think in the end, nearly half the speakers were female, which to me is maybe a little bit of a reinforcement point of the talks might have been low, but they were some pretty damn good ones because they were picked.
Well, it's quality over quantity, John.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. And I think that's sort of an interesting, way to begin to sort of think about it. I mean, it's a very crowded world, and Ellen and I are the white males on the call here, and there's no doubt about it. People like us, we're sort of very much the dominant in this industry, but it doesn't mean that there's not amazing voices out there. The other thing I wanted to kind of bring up is, Misty was talking about mentoring, and I think that's really the only way that you start to bring people along, because it helps you sort of feel comfortable in the room where you're at. I remember, Cam say, I think we all on the call know him. And, in terms of bringing in students into this industry that would have no way ever been a part of it, and many times are the first people to go to college in their entire families, speaks to sort of, the volumes of opportunities, and also speaks to the volume of what mentorship can provide. There's some really good programs that are actually getting started in the mainframe space. One of them that, we work with IBM and Broadcom and Rocket Software is called Making Our Strong Communities Stronger. And it's interesting because it kind of takes a different sort of focus than the typical diversity focus that you'd be used to, but kind of digs into sort of that unconscious bias and really starts to unpack some of those stories. And I remember sitting in some of those conversations, the things that you're talking about, Misty, and some of those personal experiences. I mean, it's just so spot on. And I think it gives us all here a little bit of pause to sort of think about coming back to that point of intentionality. This is happening. We may not even realize we're doing it. And most of the time we don't. But I mean, Alan, your point of catching, an all white male speaker lineup going out the door, which I've been a part of events that did not catch that one out the door, and they got drugged through the mud. And Deb probably knows stories from projects, communities we've worked with. I mean, but not to jump on Missy's point, but the fact that you pulled the plug on that is gigantic.
Well, but we got drugged through the mud anyway, because the page was up, and yeah. No doubt, we caught it too late.
But I mean, those are sort of the things when you're thinking about intentionality, kind of goes back upstream to where Misty's saying of, the way you solve this is by actually seeing your own blind spots, and it can be just so tough to.
Let me bring up. I'm sorry, go.
Yeah, I was going to say, remember how I mentioned that your brain is automatically trained based on the data that it's fed. So the intentionality, at least for me, and I'm trying to encourage as many people as possible, is to intentionally retrain your brain. So here's a great example. There's a little story that talks about a man and his son is in an accident, and they go to different hospitals, and the doctor walks into the emergency room with the son and says, "I can't operate. This is my son." And you ask this riddle, and people struggle to realize the most obvious answer is the doctor's a woman. They really struggle. And I've had young feminists spend 15 minutes with me coming up with every machination and not able to identify that the doctor was a woman. And I had a man saying, "Oh, well, I didn't get it, but I'm not biased because my own doctor's a woman." Well, you haven't seen enough female doctors to really retrain your brain. It's not your fault. It's based on the data that you're fed. So by participating in sessions like this, My Women of COBOL, Stacey's mentorship program, Deb's events, all of these things that you're talking about, all of us need to go out of our way to counteract the data that we're being fed, that's the spoon-fed data, and counteract it with seeing more women being technical. seeing more women in these
Seeing
roles.
more women in leadership too, not just
Yeah.
technical,
Leadership.
but in leadership. And speaking up, we don't have a lot of time. This one may run over. I hope no one has anything else they need to do today. But here's another thing, and I think about some of it is going to be a COVID kind of effect, right? Misty, to your point, more women graduate with STEM degrees than men, but yet it doesn't make its way into the marketplace. They're intimidated, they're discriminated, but another reason is, quite frankly, they want to raise families. And it's very hard to rise to a leadership position and to really excel, because being a mom is a full-time job. During COVID, it got a little bit easier because you could work from home, right? So if you had to go take your kids, pick your kids up, drive the kids, and a lot of dads all of a sudden had to start, playing that caretaker role that moms have been doing. Well, now COVID, hopefully, knock wood, is ending, and some people have to go back to the office. And I think we're starting to already see women say, look, I'm not willing to give up being a mom and a caregiver, and I'm not willing to give up my career, and that means something has to give. Right?
Yep.
What do you think?
I think that companies have to be, they have to have learned from COVID. They have to be able to give not just women, but women and men the flexibility to do their job and to trust people to do their job wherever they have to do their job, whether it's at home or whether it's in the office or whether it's a hybrid situation. But, we can't go back to, you have to be in the office 8 to 6, and then you have to go run and pick up your kid from after school care, and then you have to make dinner, and then to do the homework, and then you're burnt out.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's sustainable. And I think people have realized through the COVID experience, let's say, that, one, teachers are incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm. I hope people realize it.
Yeah. And two, that, employers have to be flexible, and they have to trust their employees.
I'm optimistic, Stacy, because that dynamic that you're describing comes at a time when companies are struggling to fill their open positions. So the law of supply and demand says that the employees, the workers, now have the ability to demand a better work-life balance. So right at the moment when people realize how meaningful it is to be engaged with your family and at home and have a life, is exactly when they have the power to make something happen. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I am too.
Deb, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the opportunity that folks, I don't know if people know this, but the Linux Foundation has been remote since I think the inception of it, if I'm correct. Yeah. And so we've had that flexibility, and it's been really interesting. Folks always were like, how do you work from home? Like, how do you even communicate with other people? And then the pandemic hit, and they were like, how have I not worked from home? I can go get my kids. I can be a part of this meeting. I can have, it takes obviously some adjustment, but I can have these things. And I know even from the folks that I know, those that are being asked to go back to an office are saying, but why? I've done my job the past 2 years. I've managed to, prove and have the trust. You have the trust in me to do it. What is changing so drastically that I do have to go back? And companies are starting to realize they're right. And I think the thing that Stacy said, and that was very true, is it's the trust. You have to trust your employees. And if you trust them and give them the balance, they're going to return the work to you. Like, that's how that works. They're going to actually probably work harder and better because of it. So I'm optimistic too, that this is a great opportunity for that.
I think it benefits more than just women too. When you think about unconscious bias, men suffer from unconscious bias as well. And in particular, whenever a man prioritizes his family over his job, he's seen as weak, he's seen as less than a man, right? So I think that there's a cultural change that needs to happen there as well that enables men to be engaged and fully share the responsibilities of the family. Because right now it's really hard for them to do that.
As a parent of 4 kids, I will completely agree with you. Especially when it's funny because I was at a volleyball tournament for my oldest daughter on Sunday, and I looked around and there's a lot of moms there, not a lot of dads. There's a couple dads that thinks their daughters are going to, play at Stanford, but we'll let that go. But there
always is.
Hey, but I think it's important because, there's so much of that. And I think just personally, I know kind of twisting this from a women's to a men's thing, but we'll roll with it for a moment. I think there's so much of, and I think this actually applies to women too. There's so much of that. Sometimes I think many of us have missed of our families. Some people have really struggled with that.
It's the whole work-life balance. But John, with all due respect, you're mansplaining here.
I know.
I'll call you on it.
I know. Fair enough.
Because here's the thing. I think historically women have had to make a choice. Career or family. Men didn't make that choice.
No. They actually didn't really have, they could go either way, but, generally speaking, it was women that were sort of put in, I'll be honest, like one of the first jobs I had, we were getting ready to hire a new person onto our team. And one of the top candidates was a female. And the owner, who actually was a female, oddly enough, ended up saying we're not offering her the job because she's a young female and we're worried she's
have kids
for a family.
And that's another point. Sometimes women
are
worse than men about this bias.
Right. No, and I think that, women have to be other women's allies, right? Women have to build women up.
Yeah.
It's let's get rid of this. You have to be perfect, right? You can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Women need to be strong allies for other women. And I think
this is where Deb's activities, where she does all of those events to bond women together. And my pet peeve is that you have those events and it's all women. We really need men to help, right? It's not women solving this problem. It's not men solving this problem. It's us solving this problem. And those let's support women in these tech roles events. I'd really love to see more men attend, but they feel like they're not welcome. I've had conversations with men. They feel like that's a women's thing. I'll feel like an interloper. But really,
some women make them feel that way, to be fair.
Although I think in some of our LF events, Deb, I think that tune is starting to change a little bit at a few of those, right?
Yeah. So I think it's specific to the event and the purpose of the event. There are some that are just women only because they want it to be a safe space for people to have those conversations. But we definitely are seeing a lot more that are opening up to more of just diversity conversations, because it's more than just, we are, Women's History Month, we're talking about women, but diversity in general. There are a lot of different ways outside of just women that you want to see diversity within a workforce, within a community, within anything. And so it's opening up those conversations to more than just that, because like Missy said, we will only make it so far if we're not grouping together to work on this as a collaborative effort versus just trying to fight by ourselves. So we definitely try to encourage those conversations with everyone.
Guys or gals, I have to pull the plug. I'm sorry, we're way over time.
I'm going to do one more plug.
Go ahead, go.
Open Mainframe Summit. Everyone come continue the conversation with us. Philadelphia in September. We would love to have you. Please join.
Absolutely.
Actually, I got to do a quick plug too. Our COO here at Techstrong, Charlene O'Hanlon, does a video series much like this. I think it's every 2 weeks, not monthly, called Tech Strong Women. And she has some great women on there, and it's a great conversation. If you're interested in this topic, Charlene hits it a lot, though she doesn't like much of what Misty and Stacy said too. she doesn't like to just focus on women because it's got to be how the whole world exists, not just half the world. Anyway, thank you all so much. This was, in my mind, a very frank. I mean, we maybe didn't discuss to the agenda exactly as it was written, but we had a great conversation. I got a lot off my chest. I feel better. Thank you all for coming on here. John, as always, thanks to you and the Open Mainframe Project. We'll be back next month with another Open Mainframe program. You can check out the agenda on it, or get it off on Techstrong TV. But until then, Stacy, Misty, Deb, thank you all so much, and not just for being on today's show, but for taking a leadership position as women in tech and moving that needle, right? That's what it's about. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the Predict 2022 virtual event. This is a presentation by Ali Khan, who is a partner in the U.S. consulting services arm over at PwC. His presentation is titled Entering Cloud 2.0, What Sits at the Heart of Cloud Transformation in 2022. A lot of takeaways in this presentation, so I do encourage you to check it out. Let's roll it now.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ali Khan, and I'm a partner at PwC. I work in our cloud and digital platform business within the Consulting Solutions Group. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, primarily focused on engineering, which transcended into cloud on all the three major CSPs, namely AWS, Azure, and GCP. And I've built very large commercial systems globally for some of our largest clients, both in financial services and outside. Most of them have been focused on things such as, application design, data center migration, information security, and then lately on cloud native architectures. So today in this session, we're going to talk about a couple of things as they relate to cloud. I'm going to talk about where the cloud industry started. I'll kind of provide a quick primer on that, but we're going to move into what is happening in the cloud industry now and what are the trends that we see. So believe it or not, a lot of people think that there's a lot of headway that is made in cloud, but cloud is in its infancy still. If one were to look at the cloud business, maybe 5-6 years ago, it primarily started as a cost takeout play. Basically moving applications sitting in data centers over to virtualized network storage and compute, and that really was what cloud was all about. Over time, that transcended into robust strategies around application migration or workload migration, so to speak. And again, there are various ways to do that. But in the inception, it was just taking straight workloads and migrating them over to the cloud, basically wrapped up, so to speak, meaning there was very little re-architecture, redesign of those workloads. It was just moving them from captive IT to a cloud solution. That basically evolved into what we now know as cloud innovation, which is really re-architecting, redesigning businesses, processes, applications to run natively on the cloud itself. And that really came about because over time, the major CSPs started evolving and modernizing a lot of their tech stack. The tech stacks were fairly rudimentary when the whole cloud journey started, but over time, as we've all seen, those techs have become fairly complicated, as well as very diverse in the set of offerings and capabilities that they offer to the market. And organizations have been making use of that, and hence the whole notion of cloud innovation and the business around it has changed significantly to where a lot of the work that we see now that's happening in the market and a lot of innovation is around rebuilding a lot of the enterprises ground up on cloud native technology, so to speak. And that is what both these trends, I would refer to them as the cloud migration business as well as the cloud innovation business. I would call it Cloud 1.0, so to speak. What is interesting, though, is for the last 12 to 24 months, there's a new concept of something called Cloud 2.0, which is really building up vertically deep solutions in the market on cloud, native to cloud, which is categorically different from what Cloud 1.0 is. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. An interesting thing that we at PwC has seen in our estimation of the market when we actually do surveys is there's widespread cloud adoption, particularly after COVID or post-COVID. About 92% of the surveys that we've conducted, respondents have come back and said that they are in the cloud journey. They're in the cloud journey at least at some stage. But that's not the most interesting statistic. The more interesting statistic is that 53% of those respondents report that they fail to realize substantial value from their cloud investments. So there's this big gap between perceived value and realized value. And we've done some double clicks to really understand why there's such a huge discrepancy in the adoption rate as opposed to the actual value realization rate. So we'll talk about that as well a little bit more. One of the major trends, like I talked about earlier, within the evolving cloud model is legacy coexistence. There are very many, but I'll talk about some of the major ones, and legacy coexistence is one of the major ones in there. And essentially what that points to is, notwithstanding the fact that a lot of organizations and enterprises are planning to move to the cloud or in that process today, that does not mean that legacy IT is going to go away anytime soon. And there are a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of capital investment that has not been fully depreciated for economic cost models. That investment is going to stay in place for some period of time to work its way out. But the more important part is extracting years and years or decades of legacy tech footprint and moving it to the cloud is a gargantuan task. There are a certain set of capabilities that cloud solutions do not have today, and those capabilities will have to evolve over time. For the captive IT estate to move completely to the cloud. So for the foreseeable future, what we see is that a lot of our clients and customers in the market will basically operate in a bimodal kind of a tech landscape where they'll have a legacy footprint and then they'll have a cloud footprint. And it's interesting to note that any organization which is not a greenfield organization born today with a clean sheet of paper, most of the organizations that actually have legacy IT should really make provisions to make sure that they will continue to operate some part of that legacy IT, and they have to find an effective bridge between legacy IT and the cloud infrastructure that they want to basically go build their new systems on. One of the major things in that regard is the data estate. For the most part, what we see is, for the foreseeable future, a significant portion of the enterprise data estate will continue to live on the legacy side. With workloads being moved over to the cloud side, a lot of those workloads are either being served through transient data on cloud, or they're making calls back into the legacy infrastructure to basically source data. And that has been made easier, I would say, relatively easier with the advent of serverless computing on cloud providers. So that legacy coexistence model will coexist from a tech perspective. More importantly, enterprises also need to think about that from the perspective of tooling as well as staffing, meaning finding the right set of people to be able to run both of these environments, so to speak. Less so on the cloud side because it's managed, but more so on the captive IT. There is a dwindling supply of resources in that regard because a lot of the new churn within the IT capability or IT talent pool is inflecting towards cloud. So that pool of folks that are basically trained and have the capabilities and the training to basically run legacy systems is becoming smaller and smaller. That is presenting a major challenge for the market in terms of being able to work in this bimodal model. The next major trend that I want to talk about today is this multi-CSP model, meaning enterprises that choose to run on more than one cloud provider. 71% of the CIOs in our surveys have reported that either today they run in a multi-CSP model or they plan to run in a multi-CSP model. And that's an interesting trend within the cloud business, basically suggesting that there's going to be less and less concentration with respect to a particular cloud provider. That has implications both on the talent pool side. It also has implications on how technology evolution will work. And then it also has implications in terms of where the industry is going to go forward in a general sense. And I'll talk about all three of these sub-trends at some length. The first question is around technology and tooling. Does the right technology and tooling exist today to effectively govern and run a multi-CSP model? The current technology landscape with regards to that management function leaves a lot to be desired. There's not an effective control plane that exists that can actually manage a multi-CSP model across all the various aspects of telemetry management, centralized governance and control, applying the right kind of audits on control points, getting service telemetry as well as service monitoring across a multi-CSP model, so on and so forth. There are various solutions out there in the market, but none of those solutions are fairly robust now. So there's a lot of individual and I would say enterprise-focused engineering and capability upskilling that has to be done in order to run in a multi-CSP model. And the reason for that is quite simple. Is because majority of the CSPs or all the three CSPs ideally want to maximize consumption on their platform. So over time, as more and more enterprises look at this multi-CSP model, there will be capabilities that will evolve in the market for managing that central control plane, but that is still something that is in its inception. The second point is around talent. So talent, as we all know, in the cloud market is difficult to come by these days. There's an acute dearth of engineering skills. There's an acute dearth of product management skills, good product management skills. When an organization decides to operate in a multi-CSP model, it makes that talent acquisition process even more complicated because now, we'll need more engineers that are basically trained in both the environments. There are obviously differences from one CSP to another. There are obviously commonalities, but there are differences as well. So from a talent perspective, those differences have to be accounted for. And then, bare bones, these different CSPs operate in slightly different ways. The other aspect, of course, is aligning the consumption patterns for the CSPs in terms of a commercial contracting structure. How you contract with one CSP might be very different from how you contract with another CSP. So there's some practical challenges that have to be surmounted from a talent perspective in that case. The question then becomes, why are enterprises choosing to move to a multi-CSP model? And the reasons for that are basically, risk mitigation. Post-COVID, even in the pre-COVID era, but post-COVID, a lot of the compute is moving very aggressively to cloud. What that essentially means is tier one systems that are client-facing systems that need to be 24/7 up cannot withstand downtimes. And it's really the stratification of workloads to basically introduce risk mitigation into that whole ecosystem is at the heart of a multi-CSP model for enterprises. But the other reason for that is particularly for global enterprises that have a global footprint, a multi-CSP model makes sense because of the non-uniform distribution of data centers and availability zones across these three major cloud providers. Now, again, that ecosystem is homogenizing over time where the three CSPs are springing up local data centers in all of the major regions in the world, but yet it's not uniform enough. So for cross geography kind of deployments, particularly cross continent, for global organizations, global enterprises, we see this multi-CSP model in effect. It is also in relation to local regulation. For example, GDPR in EMEA is also forcing a lot of decisions with regards to the multi-CSP model, because the rate at which these three CSPs are basically subscribing to some of these regulations, local regulations, is different. They're not uniform in terms of support for these regulations. So for instance, you might see a lot of AWS and Azure, particularly in EMEA, because their GDPR uptake has been a little bit stronger. The other part is organizations are evolving more sophisticated use cases onto cloud and are therefore differentially stratifying workload types across different cloud providers based on the relative maturity of their offerings. And the last bit, of course, is as more and more tier one application workloads are being moved to the cloud, disaster recovery, high availability, resiliency, etc., are becoming paramount concerns. Organizations are leveraging multi-cloud footprints to hedge against these concerns. The next trend I want to talk about is what we started off with, the difference between Cloud 1.0 and Cloud 2.0. I talked at some length about Cloud 1.0. Let me talk about Cloud 2.0. Cloud 2.0 is essentially around, the idea is focused around the build out of applications that are sector specific or industry specific, vertically deep on a cloud infrastructure, right? Which is different from migrating applications to the cloud or modernizing applications, so to speak. And recently there has been a huge push to basically provide that stratification and that specialization in cloud build out. An example of that would be building out a bank on cloud, or building out a finance solution on cloud, or building out a health solution or a industrial product solution on cloud, so to speak. More and more, what we see is not only from the global system integrators, but also from the CSPs. They're evolving their own portfolio of services and offerings in the market that are focused on sector-specific, vertically deep cloud-native solutions, as opposed to just selling capacity. If one were to look at the primary business model of the three CSP providers today, it's capacity-based. Doesn't matter what particular layer we're talking about, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's platform as a service, or even if it's software as a service like Salesforce, etc. It's around capacity. But that's a low margin business. The area of the business that has not been extensively tapped up until now, at least, is what I referred to earlier as Cloud 2.0, which is around the sector concentration and sector-specific systems and biz apps being built natively on cloud platforms, and then building out commercial models around them in terms of putting them in the market, with different value propositions. That is really at the core of the next phase of modernization, so to speak, with respect to cloud. The other interesting point is a lot of organizations missed the Cloud 1.0 wave. either as a provider of those services or as a consumer of those services. And the barrier to entry and the cost, the capital investment that is needed to actually go and realize that journey is quite immense. So rather than reinventing the wheel, a lot of organizations, particularly from a consumer perspective, are not going to Cloud 1.0 altogether, meaning they're not looking to undertake a long, extensive migration of their existing application portfolio to the cloud, or they're not looking to go and rewrite their existing systems natively on cloud. And this is particularly true for the middle market, so to speak. What they're instead looking for are prepackaged solutions that can be wrapped in attractive commercial models that are running natively on cloud to be provided to them so they can run their business operations, whether that's a ledger solution in a box, or whether that's an insurance solution in a box, or something else for that matter. And the provider side of this space is very swiftly inflecting to that demand in the market by building out these solutions vertically. A classic example of this would be the latest set of offerings in sector clouds from all of the three CSP providers, particularly from Microsoft and from Amazon. And we'll see that trend accelerate more and more, not only just from the CSPs, but also from service providers and consulting firms that are basically in this space, primarily around the services portfolio, but we will see a rapid evolution of the product portfolio as well from some of these organizations that will bring these sector solutions out into the market. Because what they do have is a legacy of deep transformation experience. What we see now is a lot of these organizations are taking that business transformation experience at the foot of building out their technology practices and cloud practices, and basically digitizing that transformation business on cloud. And that digitization of the transformation business on cloud will manifest itself in what I just termed as Cloud 2.0, sector-specific, vertically deep solutions that are run natively on the cloud. The last topic I want to talk about was the first topic that I started off with, which was the realization in the gap between the perceived value of cloud and the actual realized value of cloud that we found in a lot of our survey respondents, and some of the reasons for that, and how do organizations basically go about making sure that gap can be minimized as much as possible. The general observation that we have is the first movers on cloud have largely failed to realize cost efficiencies as they've moved out of their local data centers. This has primarily been the case due to poor workload planning, leveraging IT metrics as a proxy for business value, starting on a broad cloud migration move out of data centers, but not devoting enough time and resources to building the foundational scaffolding needed for moving business applications to the CSPs, and most importantly, poor upskilling of internal staff. Increasingly, more and more enterprises are devoting resources to building out the foundational services that are needed to move to the cloud. For instance, banks are building out platforms that would enable them to automatically fail over to a different region or a different CSP. In a multi-CSP model, should an availability zone or region go offline, without application teams needing to build the level of resiliency into each individual system. And there are a lot of other cloud scaffolding services that are not currently provided by the CSPs that some of these organizations are internally building. That landscape will get populated fairly quickly and will be taken over by the CSPs as the CSPs move their stack more north and south and east and west. But there are still quite a few gaps in there in terms of making sure that the realized value metric can meet the perceived value metric, so to speak. The other big reason for that gap is majority of the cloud transformations initially started off as an IT project, primarily vectored into the CIO, CTO office. But as enterprises are moving to cloud as a business model, that vectoring of the focus is changing markedly. Cloud is not just a IT concern any longer. It's really the concern of the entire C-suite, all the way from the CFO to the CEO to the CRO to this chief operating officer, and obviously the CIO, so to speak. What has been missing acutely thus far is that joint ownership of a cloud transformation for a given enterprise, and that is why we see a lot of this gap between realized value and the perceived value. More and more as enterprises are becoming savvy about their needs from a compute perspective and also from a technology perspective in general, and more as they're beginning to understand what the cloud offers as a business model, so to speak, we will see that this gap will start shrinking. One of the other reasons why we do say this gap was initially a lot of the boards, enterprise corporate boards, were uninformed about what cloud means as a business model and how can they run their business on cloud. It's interesting now what we see is boards are asking for education on cloud. These are boards that are composed of non-technologists, but it's very interesting that they're asking for, before they actually undertake approve a large cloud transformation journey, they're asking for some deep education on cloud, particularly on the financial metrics side and the governance side, before they actually go and approve any of these deals. So, combine and taking all of that together, we will see a lot of education and a lot of upskilling at various levels, all the way from boards down into the actual developers who are building these solutions out. And over time, this gap that we see today will start shrinking. I don't expect that to go away anytime soon completely, but we do expect that there would be a marked reduction, at least not a 40% point difference between what we see today. It will shrink considerably in that space.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that offers up 8 skills cloud architects need to succeed. For cloud architects, a deep understanding of cloud tools and technologies is only the starting point for skills that need to be mastered. Enjoying a successful career as a cloud architect requires much more, including certain skills that are typically not associated with the tech industry, and some of which may surprise you. From technical skills such as architecture and design to softer skills including communication and emotional intelligence, this article details the many and varied things that cloud architects must be proficient in to be successful in their career. And we list 3 must-haves when implementing DevSecOps. The logic behind DevSecOps is undeniable, viewing security as a shared, collaborative responsibility among development, operations, and security functions starting at the earliest possible stage. That methodology, known as shifting left, rather than in silos, enables the deployment of secure software at the speed and responsiveness that today's business conditions require. Yes, you need Dev and Sec and Ops, but organizations that have successfully meshed the 3 functions under one paradigm typically focus on 3 other ingredients to ensure success. This article outlines what those 3 ingredients are and details how they can mean the difference between somewhat successful organizations and those that are just simply killing it. In news, Harness has acquired Chaos Native as part of a plan to more deeply integrate chaos engineering within DevOps workflows. The company also added Service Reliability Management, or SRM, and Security Testing Orchestration, or SRO, capabilities to its CI/CD platform. With these moves, the company plans to shift chaos engineering further left as part of an effort to enable developers to test the resiliency of their applications before they are deployed in a production environment. It also is looking to automate more of the lower-level tasks that today's DevOps teams often manually manage. Harness SRM enables DevOps teams to automatically track service level objectives that are attached to specific pipelines within the Harness CI/CD platform, while Harness STO makes it easier to orchestrate security testing across multiple pipelines. All right, over on Container Journal, we have the latest from Anchor, which has added an extension to its Anchor Enterprise Software Supply Chain Management platform for container-based applications that can automatically generate and continuously update a software bill of materials. The latest version of Anchor Enterprise also offers the ability to automatically generate and analyze SBOMs, or software bills of material, across the entire software development lifecycle, which is critical because it enables IT and security professionals to identify the software components being used within a cloud-native application environment. Security risks, which range from vulnerabilities and malware to misconfigurations and secrets identified before applications are deployed, to zero-day vulnerabilities that are discovered after deployment, become much easier to remediate. Anchor is pursuing an API-first approach to SBOMs to reduce the friction that often occurs between developers and the teams that ultimately are held responsible for application security. That approach should make it easier for organizations to then embrace DevSecOps best practices. And Weaveworks has made generally available an update that embeds policy as code capabilities into its continuous delivery platform to improve application security. The capabilities are based on technologies the company gained with its acquisition of Megalix earlier this year. The latest Weave GitOps Platform Edition also enables organizations to use the profile catalog to define services that can be used across multiple application development teams. Weaveworks is also making available technology previews of integrations with the open source Terraform tool for provisioning infrastructure as code and the Visual Studio Code IDE provided by Microsoft, and has added a graphical observability tool for tracking the health of applications to Weave GitOps Core, which is an extension of the open source Flux tool for managing the delivery of container images that is at the core of the Weaveworks CD platform. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we look at cloud automation as a key to future-proofing cybersecurity. According to the results of a survey by Delinea, more organizations are turning to cloud automation to help them future-proof cybersecurity plans, particularly when coupled with autonomous privileges and access. More than half of respondents to the survey said the leading factor driving their need to future-proof their access security in 2022 is increasingly complex multi-cloud IT environments. There you go. In addition, 86% of respondents are exploring ways to automate access controls, especially for privileged access. Cloud automation is about moving beyond security by design and into security by default. And as organizations shift beyond building systems and applications and instead focus on services and experience, cloud automation is increasingly a top priority for businesses to succeed in future-proofing cybersecurity. And finally, we ask the question, how secure is your cyber infrastructure? Cyber threats and attacks, including insider threats, nation-sponsored entities, and evolving cyber attack techniques such as zero-day and targeted malware, electronic espionage, and complex data exfiltration are not going away. It may seem like an obvious question to ask, but understanding the security of your cyber infrastructure is critical in today's threat landscape. Being proactive is critical to staying ahead of the latest threats. For most organizations, this means fine-tuning your cybersecurity programs. To do this, you need to look at every layer of your program, of which there are several essential security layers necessary to shore up your security posture and threat awareness. This article details what organizations need to consider when building out and refining their cybersecurity programs and the impact they can have on their entire security footprint. All right, that's it for the headlines. I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new batch. Until then, I hope you have a great day, and please, whatever you do, Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Andrei Mihalenko, who is the Vice President of Product and Engineering at Apptio. Andrei, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, actually.
Great. So I wonder if you can introduce us to Apptio.
Absolutely, be happy to. So Apptio's mission in very simple terms is to help enterprise make good technology investment decisions and answer the questions like, are we getting value from our tech investments? Does our work that can span across the entire enterprise, technology related, align to the strategy that we have? More specifically, should we move our workloads from on-prem to the cloud? Why would we be doing this? That's essentially the type of questions that Apptio helps companies answer, and a lot more. The way it does it, it's because Apptio is a very intelligent platform that pulls the data from a variety of different systems like ERP and corporate financial management systems, SaaS, cloud providers, work management, transforms this data into meaningful insights so that our customers can make good technology investment decisions. And not just look at the data, but actually take an action so that they can replan their work, they can move funds from maybe run into grow so that they can innovate more and better. And those are kind of things that we work with companies from Fortune 100 and above and helping them do.
Awesome.
So that's what really Apptio is about. And about me just specifically, I've been with Apptio just a little bit over a year. Prior to that, I was a co-founder and the CEO of a company called Target Process for more than 15 years. And it was acquired by Apptio last February. And we're now part of the Apptio portfolio of products focusing on enterprise agile planning, which has been our focus all these years prior to that. And we're the leader in that space. Excellent.
Well, I've been hearing a lot more about Agile lately. I mean, obviously, it's been kind of in our toolkit for a while now, but with the advent of so many organizations undergoing their digital business process transformation and just trying to kind of keep up with everything in light of the pandemic pushing everybody to work remotely full time for a long time, and the increase in just organizations that need to address their customers from wherever they are. It seems like Agile is becoming a greater part of the conversation again. So I wonder, is that something that you're hearing with your organizations, with your customers there?
Absolutely, Charlene. We've been on this journey on Agile since 2004, roughly, when Agile was just a team level conversation. How do you do Scrum? Pretty much, what are some basic practices around really team agility? And this is where really things start, because if you don't have effective Agile teams, nothing is going to scale up from there. But as we've been at this for all these years, we've seen how actually Agile been scaling outside of the team into the program levels, portfolio. Now, the whole enterprises are running in an Agile way simply because this is the only way you can really stay nimble, continue to innovate. You always have a lot more to do than resources. And how do you effectively manage all of this huge demand within a very limited enterprise typical resources? And that's type of things that Agile helps you to really streamline and help you answer those questions. And of course, the pandemic and COVID, where companies had to go through digital transformations within months versus the years, really proved that the companies that have adopted things like SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, one of the ways to scale Agile, not the only one. But those that have started this journey, they have went through this huge shock of transformation much better. They survived. They've actually reinvented themselves. And the ones that didn't definitely struggled quite a bit. And that's only going to continue.
Well, that's indicative of the market in general. I keep hearing about the organizations that don't keep an open mind and don't, the culture does not enable them to actually pivot and really adopt new processes and new technologies and methodologies to get stuff done faster. They're the ones that are failing in their digital business transformation initiatives simply because they can't wrap their minds around it. They can't wrap their brains about it. They're around it. They don't, they're just so entrenched in their ways that they can't move forward, and that ultimately is going to be the failure of the company. But companies that have adopted agile practices and are actually incorporating it into different parts of the business, to your point, are certainly succeeding. But I imagine there are certain areas within an organization where agile kind of just doesn't work for them. Or am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I think you really have to be pragmatic about it. Don't just throw agile everything. Agile is great when you deal with uncertainty, when you don't really have a predefined you're not going to build a bridge using agile or build a house. In most cases, it doesn't make sense. However, in software development, when you're building something that hasn't been built or not exactly like that, there is, and the people that are users on the other hand that are going to be involved in using this and figuring out for the first time whether it really solves their problems or not, the only way to do or deal with this uncertainty is by applying simple, very basic agile and really common sense principles. Don't make it huge, big upfront planning investments because there's a lot of things you just don't know. Build something small. It's okay if you fail, like you mentioned a couple of things before. Failure, fear of failure, or the culture. Those are just those basic principles of agile that you can build. If it fails, you learn much faster. And then you decide whether you're going to pivot or change something about it. The culture is a big part of that because you have to accept the failure is just a simple learning and simply an opportunity to improve further. So I would say anywhere where the software development uncertainty is involved in new products, mostly digital is where you're going to see a lot more agile being used. Obviously, things like or areas like marketing, and you start seeing the HR, where there's also a lot of potentially unknowns and collaboration between humans and people is where it makes sense.
So I almost feel like there are certain companies, though, that take a kind of an all or nothing approach to agile, and those companies aren't really reaping the benefits that agile can offer because to our last point, it just doesn't make sense in certain parts of the organization. So are you seeing that, and are companies understanding more what exactly what agile means to their organizations? Because obviously it's not a blanket statement. It's not.
Sure. I think most companies now are familiar, especially in the technology space where I'm at, with the agile concept. What's it about? If you look at the data, 60-some% of even Fortune 100 companies have adopted, maybe not company-wide, but at the business unit or departmental level or at some initiative, some variation of scaled agile. Again, mostly it's safe, but there's other frameworks that have been used and have seen. And as they're moving from this project to product approach, where that is one of those mega trends shaping just really how the digital work gets done. That it's really you organizing the people around products that are long-lived, stable teams that actually really have a vision, a roadmap, and purpose, not just a waterfall projects chart. That's all you care about. That's you get things done on budget and on time, whether it brings the value or not. Unfortunately, that's been the reality. So once you see a lot more of that happening, and that's widespread across all organizations and all industries, from financials to healthcare to manufacturing. And I'd say that the maturity is definitely a lot higher than it was, 5 years ago.
So, do you think that it's a project to product mindset and way of approaching application development and projects in general? Do you think that that's becoming or has become a critical element to digital transformation, or do you think it's just kind of one? Okay.
No, I don't think it's as bad. It's Gartner and many other surveys have proven that the proliferation of the product manager as a persona in the organization that has the expertise, that has this product centricity, applies the design thinking, and really looks at customer at the center of why we do and what we do, and how we can, in the fastest possible way, to deliver something to this customer so that we can actually give them value and then learn from that feedback we're going to get from the customers. It's all really is about incremental product development. And also, how do we fund that? Because this is what I'm personally passionate about as part of the now App2, which has always been an expert in the technology business management and the helping IT organizations manage their costs and budgets and plans and forecasts. How do we actually join that with the work that has been done to innovate and build digital products? How do we bridge the gap between the finance folks that are still, a lot of them are thinking in the old annual project-based kind of concept and paradigm? Mm-hmm. How do we marry that with the agile, which is all about much faster cadence of delivery?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it, because it's almost like the pendulum swings one side to the other and back and forth. And now we've got product managers again. Before we had project managers, because organizations were saying we can't afford to have a stable full of experts in one area. We need to have these people who are much more well-versed in a number of different areas, so that they may not be experts, but they know enough to be able to get stuff done. And now we're going back to the whole product manager concept and ideal. And it kind of feels like we're going back and forth with that. Do you think we're ever kind of get to a kind of a happy medium where we will have experts, but we'll also have, but where both the project management and a product management mindset are, both important in, Yeah,
just like I said before, that agile is not an answer for everything. There's always going to be this hybrid approach where you will have, obviously, the product managers that potentially may coexist with some work which is in enterprise done better with projects, because it's a predictable really notion, something that has been done many times before, and may have this kind of stage gate approaches, and you may use a waterfall for that. That will continue to be, and it's just, I think smart organizations will again be pragmatic about the problems they're solving. If it's innovation, you're not going to use waterfall for that. You're going to use agile. If you're running some operational efficiencies or getting from what you've known have worked, and you're just trying to really optimize it and just be pretty much predictable because you've done that before and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you can use the projects approach and just automate as much as you can and shift most of your brain power towards the growth side of the business. And how do you innovate? How do you become? How do you create startups within your business units and enable them to flourish or fail just quickly?
Well, it's really, really fascinating, and seeing the impact that Agile can have on digital transformation is really, really interesting to see. Andre, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I think that this is something that really a lot of organizations aren't really considering deeply when they are looking at their digital transformation efforts and the impact that Agile can actually have on that. So thank you very much for having the conversation with me. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with a webinars preview. I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And of course, I've got 3 for you here, as I always do, in the hopes that you'll be able to mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Zero Trust Security for Kubernetes and Container Workloads. This one is happening tomorrow, guys. It's Tuesday, March 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This is sponsored by New Vector. Any mission-critical workloads require full lifecycle security coverage, and a zero trust security approach can proactively protect your pipeline, supply chain, test environments, and the critical production runtime environment. Container applications, the Kubernetes platform, and hosts themselves also need to be secured as a full cloud native stack. So this webinar will offer up how to use the New Vector security platform as a complete solution to enforce zero trust controls with built-in security information capabilities, or automation capabilities, I should say. Good stuff. All right, the second one is called Improving AppSec with Application Security Posture Management. This one is also happening tomorrow, Tuesday, March 29th. This one is at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Bionic. By now, everyone has heard of the XAST scanning technologies. Most have been around for more than 15 years, but organizations are still struggling to eliminate application security issues, such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, because these scanning tools only look at vulnerability through a vulnerability lens, not a contextual risk lens. The session looks at application security posture management as a solution for application security risk, as well as application architecture risk and drift. ASPM looks at risk from an architectural risk perspective and integrates with CI/CD pipelines to ensure you understand the entire application architecture and not just the security bugs in the architecture. Another good one there. All right, the last webinar is called Top 3 Ways to Build Security into DevOps. This one is happening Wednesday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Synopsys. DevOps teams have been tasked to deliver new applications rapidly and continuously, but security testing and remediation have failed to keep pace. Hackers have capitalized on this speed over security approach to application security and have developed new attack strategies targeted at the application layer. This webinar focuses on how organizations can build security into DevOps without sacrificing speed for quality. Specifically, how to use AppSec test orchestration to run the right tests at the right time, minimizing impact on build and release pipelines. Use vulnerability correlation and prioritization to align remediation efforts with business risks. And finally, empower your developers to secure code as fast as they write it. Awesome. All right, that's it for the webinars today. I will be back tomorrow with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope you have a great day. Please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back and rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We have a conversation. It's called The View with Vizard. It's between Mike Vizard and Dr. Mark Little, who is the Vice President of Engineering over at Red Hat. And they discuss how the arrival of Jakarta EE will actually accelerate the pace of Java innovation, giving, I guess, new life to an older technology that is Java. So good stuff there. Let's go ahead and roll the conversation.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dr. Mark Little, who's VP of Engineering for Red Hat. We're going to be talking about all things related to Jakarta. Mark, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
A lot of people have it in their heads that Jakarta is essentially just a free open source version of the traditional Java VM that everybody knows. So what is Jakarta, and what is different about it than what I might expect to see traditionally?
So Jakarta is actually based on Java EE, and it uses the Java virtual machine, so the Java VM you referenced, but it isn't a VM itself. So it has a history going back nearly 20 years. Like I said, Java EE, and before that was J2E. And it brought to Java developers, or very specifically what we term enterprise Java developers, things like high performance messaging, distributed transactions, persistence, and many other things in the form of an application container. So that was for many years under the control of Sun Microsystems and then Oracle, with a lot of other vendors contributing. So when I say under the control, I don't really mean that in a negative sense. They were the ones that created a lot of these specifications, but they wanted to do them in a way that wider vendors could participate. So you had IBM, Red Hat, Azul. You got many vendors over the years have contributed to J2E, Java E. But what happened about 2 years ago, actually probably longer than that because of the whole pandemic thing. My timeline is a bit hazy because of that. But probably 2018, I think it was. Oracle, working with Red Hat and IBM and others, decided that they really wanted to make this much more vendor neutral and move it away from Oracle's domain, Oracle's control, and move it to a vendor neutral foundation, which is the Eclipse Foundation. So it moved there, and since then, all of those vendors, and in fact many more, including the likes of Microsoft, have started to work on what was then renamed Jakarta EE, upstream, completely open source. So everything is now open source. In the past, not everything was open, but everything is now open source in the Eclipse Foundation. And they've started to work towards a more agile, nimble release schedule, starting to look at other problem domains that perhaps traditional Java EE wasn't really looking at because of its background. Things like cloud, for instance, and getting a lot more interaction from a wider community.
And what's the uptake of that been like so far? I mean, are we seeing a mass adoption, or do you think this is more of a slow-moving train where people are going to migrate over many years?
I think it's probably in the latter camp. Because one of the good things about Java EE was that it was very, very mature, and it had been battle hardened over, like I said, 20 years, more or less. And the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it plays in here, particularly when you're talking about mission critical applications, and you have implementations of that standard from Red Hat, from IBM, from Oracle, and they predate Jakarta. They're the Java EE that I mentioned before, and if they're working fine, I don't think that necessarily those applications are going to get rewritten. Certainly not overnight. We do have people who are moving away from Java EE. The last version of Java EE was version 8. So we have people in Red Hat, our customers and community members, for instance, who want to move to the latest version. They always want to be on the blazing edge. So there is that uptake of the newer version of Jakarta, and also the Java language. So the Java language is completely separate from Java, Jakarta EE and Java EE, but the Java language has evolved a lot in the last few years, and Java EE8 isn't necessarily a great fit for the latest version of Java, the language, whereas Jakarta EE is tracking that language much more. So if people are coming to enterprise Java with a view to wanting to be on the latest version of the language Java, then they will probably want to move to the latest version of Jakarta.
We hear a lot about microservices these days. Do you think that people who are trying to build those types of applications in Java are going to lend themselves more to Jakarta EE, and that's part of the shift to the cloud?
So probably not at this stage. And I probably need to give a little bit of context. So before Oracle worked with others to move Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation and became Jakarta, several of the same vendors that had been instrumental in helping to drive Java EE, including Red Hat, IBM, and a company called Pyara and another company called Tommy Tribe. In 2016, we kind of got together and we created something called Micro Profile, which was targeted at microservices. And its aim was to take a subset of the same specifications that were in Java EE, not everything. So not potentially the whole monolith, but taking a very small subset and working on those for those developers who really want to move to microservices. Like I said, that was Micro Profile. We also moved that to the Eclipse Foundation, which was one of the reasons why Jakarta went to the Eclipse Foundation. So Micro Profile is continuing to evolve. That's, at this stage, that's probably the better basis for microservices. There's a lot of activity on, because these are both now in Eclipse Foundation, of how does Micro Profile and Eclipse and Jakarta work together. And I think that's an active area of discussion. There's no real answer to that at the moment, but I do think that they do have to have a closer collaboration.
What is the pace of innovation now like? Because, for years, it was a long time between updates for Java. And so are we going to see more releases coming faster with more interesting features? And will people need to do that in sync, or will they skip versions depending on what they need? What's the future look like?
Well, it's a really good question. And going back to what I said a minute ago about Micro Profile, I think it's important to actually compare and contrast how those two efforts work to try and answer your question. So one of the other reasons that we kind of took this subset of specifications from Java EE and created Micro Profile was because we didn't think that innovation was happening quickly enough in Java EE. You're right. It had kind of stagnated in a way over the latter few years, or at least it was going really, really slowly. And one of the problems that Java EE had kind of gotten into was innovating in the standards, which is never a good thing to do. You should innovate outside of standards, and then if there's enough real-world use cases, then come together and create a standard. So the standard would give you portability at the very least, and maybe interoperability. Whereas Java EE was trying to innovate in standards, and sometimes that resulted in standards that nobody really wanted, other than perhaps the people who created them. So Micro Profile took the alternate approach and said, we'll only create standards or specifications on the back of real-world use cases. And we want those projects to be completely different. So you can have projects that aren't under the Micro Profile umbrella, working in the Apache Software Foundation, working in Eclipse, working anywhere, even just by themselves out in GitHub, for instance. They go off, they do some work, maybe they get massive adoption, and then people notice this and then come to the Micro Profile group and say, you know what, this group of people or this project over here is very, very popular in the observability space. We have nothing in observability for microservices at the moment in microprofile. Again, just, as an example, maybe we should use this because it's massively successful and try and standardize something based on that. So the innovation in microprofile is actually quicker than it has been in Java EE, but really that innovation is driven by much, much faster innovation that's happening in open source projects anywhere else. Jakarta EE needs, I think, to get to that kind of pace as well. It needs to take more of a, don't innovate in the specs that are part of Jakarta EE, innovate in other projects out there and then feed that back eventually.
Yeah. What is the biggest challenge you see organizations have when they look at migrating to Jakarta EE? What is the thing you wish they all knew going in and that they would be more prepared for?
Well, to be perfectly frank, the biggest challenge that they'll have at the moment, if they're moving from Java EE, is that unfortunately, when we moved it to the Eclipse Foundation, we had to change all of the package names. So, just in case there's anybody in your audience who doesn't know Java that well, all Java classes or interfaces can have a package name associated with them. It's like a modularization aspect. Now, the original package name format that Java EE had comes from when Sun was around, and it had Java in the name or Java X in the name. Oracle, for various reasons, wasn't prepared to donate that package name to the Eclipse Foundation. So they wanted to retain that. And as a result, we had to change all of the package names in everything. Even if there was no change in any of the signatures of the classes or interfaces, we had to change the package name. So that meant everybody had to be aware of this. And that is a barrier. We've tried to make it easier for adoption with migration tools and maybe doing on-the-fly bytecode manipulation to hide this. But generally, people, unfortunately, will have to be aware of that. It is a burden.
Do you think the pace of innovation around the building of Java applications will also increase going forward once we get Jakarta EE out there? Because it does seem like the cadence from the Java development community is a little slower than some of the other languages out there. So are we going to see a pickup in the pace of the rate at which applications are being built and deployed? And would that create some interesting DevOps challenges for people?
I actually think the pace of is going to increase regardless of what Jakarta does, and I think that's driven by a number of things. Microprofile is probably one of them, but if you look at another project called Graal VM, don't know if you've ever come across that. It's from Oracle Labs. It's a big project, but the one aspect of that project that's really generating a lot of interest today is the native Java. So you can compile Java bytecode down into native binaries. So you no longer get the build once run anywhere, but you get them to be much, much smaller. The startup time is much, much faster. The memory footprint could be much, much smaller. That has driven a lot of innovation. You just have to look around at things like Quarkus, Micronaut, and there's another project from Oracle itself called Helidon. There's a lot more innovation and in quicker pace of that innovation and releases happening there, I think. So that's probably been one of the catalysts. And you're right, that's now starting to feed back into the whole DevOps, GitOps cycles.
So it almost sounds like all these different projects will essentially have a feedback loop into each other where I may do something in one set, but over time it may go back to the base core because it's widely used, or there's going to be a lot of cross-pollination.
Yeah, and in fact, we've seen that over the years. There's some capabilities that are in the base Java language actually started at the application level and then became so core to everything everybody was doing. Everybody pushed it, or it was pushed down into the language. Now, likewise, some things that were in the language that early on everybody thought they needed, eventually it became clear, you know what, not everybody needs this. So why do we have the burden imposed on everybody? And they've been factored out, and now they're made available at the application level.
What is your sense then of, some people will talk about Java like it's the next legacy language that start to equate it with COBOL. Or do you think it will become a driver of innovation and we'll continue to see it be, it still is the dominant language in the enterprise, right?
I've been working in the industry so long, I've lost count of the number of times people have said Java is dead. I think, there's two sides of that coin. On one side, you know what? If it had became legacy like COBOL, that's not necessarily a negative. Some people think it's a negative, but COBOL is still around today. A lot of our infrastructure, a lot of our critical financial systems still rely on COBOL, and COBOL users and COBOL developers are still critical. On the other side, I don't think it's going to go that way. I think the likes of GraalVM and Quarkus and the rapid changes that we're seeing in the Java language, I think Java is going to remain a key component of the application developers toolkit for a number of years to come.
So what's your best advice to organizations about how to approach Jakarta EE? How should they prepare? Are there things they should be doing today? Or do you just kind of draw a line in the sand and say, from here on out, we're doing this?
I think if you're on Java EE, you absolutely should look at Jakarta EE. Because in some cases, like I said, even with the namespace change earlier, with tooling we've got, you could make a lift and shift to Jakarta EE, and you would at least get the benefit of the newer versions of the Java language. If you're thinking about retooling and replatforming away from Java EE, Jakarta EE is probably still a good option. But then there are a lot of other approaches like MicroProfile, like Quarkus, that use a subset of Jakarta EE. So you don't have to take it all. If you like the persistence aspects, for instance, so you like the high performance messaging, you could take that and get that from a different approach like MicroProfile or Quarkus.
Right. Hey, Mark, sounds like the whole Java community is more dynamic than ever. Things are interesting as they go. And I think we'll be talking about this well through the rest of the decade, right?
God, we're only into 2022. Yeah, maybe. Hopefully.
Hopefully, we will. Hey, Mark, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, that's it for today's Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I always enjoy bringing it to you. Just a quick reminder, we've got a whole passel of events coming up on just both in person and online. We've got our INATech conferences, they're regional conferences, happening I think we kick things off in April in Austin. It's a one-day IT-focused conference, and I hope you can join us for that one. I believe that one is, I couldn't tell you when that one is happening. I think it's at April 21st, but don't hold me to that date. I would encourage you to go to techstrongevents.com to check out the actual date as well as the agenda and the lineup of speakers. We also have a series of workshop day-long events happening in different locations around the country this year. We've got the entire lineup, and one is focused on DevOps and cloud native. The other one is focused on cybersecurity. They are one-day events that include some morning discussion sessions sessions and then afternoon actual hands-on workshop learning sessions. Really, really fascinating topics that we're going to be hosting at those events. And as I said, those are happening throughout the year in very strategically located areas, cities. I think we got Washington, D.C. coming up in mid-April, and then beyond, I couldn't tell you. But again, you can go to techstrongevents.com, check out the full lineup for those, we call them the Techstrong Live events, and check out the schedules and the speaker lineup and register for them as well. We also have a number of virtual events coming down the pipe throughout the year, so those are also located on techstrongevents.com. You can check out that lineup as well as all of the other live in-person events that we have coming up throughout the year. We've got a lot of them, so I do hope you'll be able to join us for at least one or two of them. All right, that's it for today's show. I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode, chock full of goodness. But until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.